I'm Chris Hassel. Welcome to HQ Spotlight. The first four in college basketball begins 4 weeks from tomorrow. And we got our first look at what the selection committee is thinking over the weekend as they revealed the top 16 on CBS. A few things have changed since then with games on Saturday and Sunday. But one thing that hasn't changed is the number one team in the country. The Auburn Tigers went in that battle against number 2 Bama and stake their claim to that number 1 overall seed and that number 1 ranking in the AP poll. They received all but one first-place vote in today's new poll. Alabama fell to 4. The team at number 2 is the team that just beat those Auburn Tigers a little over a week ago, the Florida Gators. I know some Florida fans are claiming, hey, we should be number 1 because we went in there and beat the Tigers. They're 2. Duke is 3. There are 5 SEC teams in the top 10. Of course, you saw the bracket reveal the top 16 over the weekend, where 5 of the top 6 teams were from the SEC. For much more on that and all things college basketball, we send it to Chris Walker and Gary Parrish with the latest. Gary?
Chris Hassel, appreciate it. C-Walk, AP poll has updated. Like Hassel told us, Auburn remains number 1, in part because the Tigers are 14-2 in quadrant 1. Nobody else can touch that. So let me ask you this. Have we reached the point where Bruce Pearl's Tigers are so far ahead of the pack that it's hard for you to even envision somebody else besides Auburn being the number 1 overall seed in the 2025 NCAA tournament?
GP, I can't believe you of all people would ask me that question. Of course, I'm going to say someone else has a chance. Chris just mentioned Florida has an axe to grind, and I'm telling you right now, we'll see how the end of the SEC schedule grinds out. And I'm telling you right now, between Tennessee, between not Texas A&M, I would say, because I think they'll lose in the SEC, but the teams that I can see that have a chance, right, would be Florida. That is one for sure, just because they beat them before and they're in the same league. The other one is Duke. Don't be surprised, because Duke will win out, and if they win the ACC, that could be a potential team that would have a chance. Tennessee is another potential team, and a team that I'm fighting. Let Jerry Palm know I'm fighting with him on, GP. And you know what I'm going to say, and we'll talk about them later, is the Houston Cougars. If they went out and they win the Big 12 and the Big World Championship, there's a chance that they can have an axe to grind as well.
Obviously, you're right. There is a chance for another team to displace Auburn from the tip top of the sport as the projected number 1 overall seed, but I'd bet against it at this point. Possible, sure, but I think unlikely. Auburn, I mentioned, 14-2 in quadrant 1, and that's the only 2 losses they have, so no additional losses outside of the first quadrant. That means Auburn right now has fewer losses than any other team in the top 25 of the AP poll, and 14 quadrant 1 wins gives them at least 6 more quadrant 1 victories than everybody else in the sport. Simply put, in my opinion, they're like a golfer on the back nine with like a 4 or 5 shot lead. Sure, they could really screw this up, but they are in a position to be the number 1 overall seed in the tournament for the first time in school history. Let's move over to the Big East. St. John's up to number 11 in the AP poll after a big win yesterday down inside Madison Square Garden against Creighton. The Johnnies now have a 2-game lead in the Big East standings with only 5 regular season games remaining. Looks like this is happening, doesn't it, C-Walks? Rick Pitino really is going to bring a Big East title to St. John's for the first time since 1992.
GP, you know how I roll. I always got my V's up. But right now, the Johnnies, they are doing a remarkable job in year 2 for Rick Pitino. The game yesterday was proof positive that this team is tried and tested. They made 11 threes against Villanova and lost, but look what they did yesterday against a very good Creighton team that never fouls and has been on a hot streak themselves. It is amazing, and people may disagree, but Rick Pitino is my coach of the year. I'm sorry. You take a team that does not make threes, right? They've shown they can make a few now, but they maul you, they rebound. They're an old school Big East program. That's what they are, an old school Big East program. That's how we used to play back in the day, and they have not won a championship since I graduated, GP. I'm not gonna say what year that is, so it may be on the screen. And they're doing things they haven't done since Walter Berry and Chris Mullin was there. How can you not say that Rick Pitino's not the coach of the year other than Bruce Pearl, but the job that they've done, and they play such an ugly style. I want to say ugly style. They play such a throwback style that, and it's fitting, GP. What you mentioned this before, and I'll say this real quick. Georgetown being great in the sport, I mean, it's necessary. I would also say UNLV one day being relevant, but St. John's being relevant and the Garden certainly puts college basketball in play the way it used to be.
Let me run you through the rest of their schedule real quick. Only 5 regular season games left. It's Wednesday at DePaul, then Sunday the rematch with UConn in the Garden, road game with Butler, home game with Seton Hall, regular season finale at Marquette. At this point, St. John's could lose any 2 of those games, and even if the other contenders never lost the rest of this regular season, they would get at least a share of the Big East title for the first time since 1992. More likely, they're going to be your outright Big East champions for the first time since 1985. Seawalk, you and I are thinking the same way. It is either Bruce Pearl or Rick Pitino for National Coach of the Year right now. Nobody else needs to apply in this moment. Before we get out of here, I want to take you down to Houston. I know how much you care about that program, how much you love that city. Kelvin Sampson's Cougars are up to number 5 in the AP poll. Won at Arizona this weekend. Now 13-1 in the Big 12, 2-game lead in the league standings. It appears Kelvin Sampson is about to win back-to-back Big 12 titles at Houston. For people who don't understand that place and that program as well as you, make us understand how wild it is, where that program was when Kelvin inherited it, that he has taken it to the top of the AAC, then moved it to the Big 12, and now he's at the top of the Big 12.
GP, it was like me, you, and maybe a couple of the producers that were at the games back in the day. And that's what it was like. It was like, I can't believe we're putting these games on TV, because I did those games for CBS, and look what they're doing now. The Fertitta Center is sold out, practice facility. They've moved from the AAC to the Big 12. And I thought when they punched up a weight class, I said, there's no way Kelvin Sampson would get this done. But we forget about Kelvin Sampson at Washington State. We forget about Kelvin Sampson at Oklahoma and what he was going to do at Indiana, GP. And look what he has transformed this program into. It's a reason why when they had the Big 8 and they went to the Big 12, they said, you know what? We're going to leave out Houston, because they know that if you gave the city of Houston this fertile recruiting ground and you put an elite coach like Kelvin Sampson there, this is what's possible, because you know who proved it? Guy V. Lewis. And now you have a juggernaut. And GP, the last thing I'll say is Kansas. I got all the respect in the world for Bill Self and what he did for probably 16 or 17 years, either get a championship or a share of the Big 12. The big dog has now been removed. The University of Houston Cougars are now the big dog on the street. And it looks like with their recruiting class, they're not looking back. Kelvin Sampson, Big 12 Coach of the Year, and now is the man in the Big 12.
It's hard to argue with you. The past 6 seasons, Houston has won 5 conference championships, and the only time that Houston didn't was a year where games were getting canceled because of COVID, and Wichita State was given the league title in the AAC with playing only 13 league games. Fact, Houston was still the best team in the AAC, that league, so this is a fact. For the 7th straight year, regardless of whether it's the AAC or the Big 12, Kelvin Sampson is running the best basketball program in his league. Chris Hassel, that is why one day he will be inducted into the Naismith Memorial Hall of Fame.
And one of the best games of the week involves Houston on Saturday at home against number 8 Iowa State. You heard Chris mention the Kansas Jayhawks. They almost fell out of the AP Top 25 today. Gary Parrish and Matt Norlander go in depth on Kansas's struggles and the 2-time defending national champion UConn Huskies. Both of those big-time blue blood programs coming off bad losses this weekend.